Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Gen Z Among the Ruins. I'm Porter.
I'm Zach.
All right, and we have a somewhat different topic, perhaps more specific than the previous ones before. But first off, how are you doing?
I am doing pretty okay right now. Right now, it's kind of stormy outside, um, and so far it's been pretty good.
Okay.
You?
I'm good. Of course, getting towards the end of the week here. It's a little warm here in Idaho, not too warm. It's definitely died down a little bit. We're getting in the 80s every day, so not too bad.
I'm so, I'm so jealous of you. Gosh,
Yeah. Um, we're I mean, there's a lot going on recently. I don't know if you heard, but the NFA is about to be dead.
Ooh, that's interesting. What's been going on with that?
So they essentially the part of the NFA regulating suppressors appears to be dead. In fact, like to commemorate it, the GOA did the first suppressor transfer since 1934 that wasn't federally regulated, because essentially they had gotten everything set up, and then the DOJ never contested it, and so they're able to move forward.
That's beautiful. Beautiful for gun rights, man. That is nice.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'd like to see it for the rest of the NFA too. Hopefully short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns come next.
Well, since you brought up the news, then likely the trend is only going to snowball from there.
Oh yeah.
Because if you make that argument for suppressors, you can make the argument for the rest of gun, let's just say, modifications at that point.
Yeah, definitely. It's getting harder and harder to defend gun control anymore. I mean, here in my home state, we just had there was an active shooter, and there were at least 4 armed individuals there when it happened, and that went really differently. There are only a couple of casualties, whereas it would have been a lot had that not happened, had the guy had not have to transition to defending himself from the citizens who were fighting back.
Yeah, I haven't. Pretty far news, like none of our shootings went national, really.
Yeah.
But Arizona is known to have a bunch of people that are just armed.
Oh, definitely.
It's just been, it's been that way for shoots since forever. I can't even remember.
Yeah, and it's a constitutional carry state too. I mean, I was armed when I was there, so I get it. And that's what's so nice about it is it's whenever you have constitutional carry, it just makes it so easy for the average person to get into it. They're not jumping through hoops to start the process. They can just carry. And that's what you want.
And I mean, it makes sense because really in Arizona, you didn't have many, barriers to owning a gun in Arizona to begin with. So constitutional carry was literally just, the final next step, because it was for a very long time known as the free state to carry a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only ones who had competition was Alaska.
There are a few others, but yeah. Alaska, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana. New Hampshire actually was the first state to pass constitutional carry, which is odd, but New Hampshire is surprisingly red for being in the Northeast.
Yeah, but they're also there's a ton of woods, there's a ton of wildlife.
Yeah.
And I don't think that a gun culture that has a ton of wildlife and a ton of forest will actually give that up, because it's hard to argue against, not owning a gun. in that area, whereas you have the Democrats have an easier way to persuade people in the city.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, and then of course in other news we had a solar eclipse over Spain, which I think is really telling. Almost in the same way of Halley's comet to William the Conqueror.
Oh yeah, the Herald of Doom.
Yeah.
Yeah, they also passed over Mecca as well, which is. um, I think we'll definitely save the topic on that, but I heard that they're having a huge apostasy crisis as well
Hmm.
in the Muslim world there.
Oh yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah, but that's a different topic that I'll just save for much later because there's a lot of research that needs to get into it, and there's other people who have talked about it who are apostates that are talking
Right.
about it as well.
Yeah.
It's they're also getting they're Gen Z.
Mm-hmm. Like
Definitely
Cyberpunk Dingo comes to mind.
Cyberpunk Dingo is a guy I really like. He talks about it a lot that it's almost 50-50 of believers and non-believers, but of course they can't say they're non-believers because of course it says in the Quran apostates must die.
Right.
If I'm using that word correctly.
No, you are.
But yes.
But, so yeah, and it's a perfect segue too, because that's largely what we'll be talking about here is immigration, and the moral foundations of it and everything like that.
Yeah, and immigration is a lot easier to talk about nowadays. Thankfully, hopefully YouTube doesn't censor us on this.
Right.
But we've done a lot of research. We've done a lot of research on this, and we have a lot to talk about.
Definitely.
Because this isn't something new at all. Definitely in our history, but what is just new is just how insidious it is, and how insane it has gotten as well. Because it's without a doubt that it absolutely affects our job market and our housing market.
Yeah, no, definitely. Which is kind of why morality is going to be at the forefront here. Because if it's challenging enough as it is, why would we bring in more people to lower the cost of living even more to make the supply of, say, homes and jobs even lower?
No, it's insane. There really isn't any good reason to really do this other than to depress wages so that you can not only pay your workers less, but to also to make your objects that you're making or production as low as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
And it makes sense for businesses to pay for politicians to increase immigration so that they can keep their products prices down, or to get workers that can work for less, because people who immigrate into the United States historically before and definitely now, they will always ask for less pay because they just got into the country.
Right. And
that's
similar
been true.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what we see with the immigration wave of the late 1800s, where the term Great American Melting Pot originated from, not our founding fathers. But what happened during that time was that certain people were brought in because of their ability to accept low wages, whether it was the Irish, the Italians, the Chinese. It was bringing in groups of people who can flood the labor supply, so that the overall demand for the individual person is lower. They're more easily replaced. They'll accept lower wages. All of those things. It unfortunately, Marx is right with the concept of class warfare because that's what it was. And ironically, the left is engaging in class warfare again with the way they do it now.
Yeah, and they're making the exact same mistakes again. And the time living, well, I should say, living during those times as a legal immigrant as a legal immigrant was not a pleasant time at all. And with the Irish, there was first the men arrived, and then the rest of their family started to arrive due to the potato famine.
Right.
And at one point, it was during the 1880s where there was more Irish in New York than there were in Dublin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
There,
even still today, there are more Americans of Irish descent than people in Ireland.
yeah. And that's devastating
Mm.
for Ireland. So I don't think there really is a country that has that sort of history because there's still more Italians in Italy, even though there's Italians in America when they started their migration.
Yeah.
And a lot of this can be documented, and you can look it up on the Library of Congress, which has great documents on that, and also pictures of those events as well. They even particularly call it the Great Arrival for Italians when there's a huge influx of them.
Right.
It was like numbered between like 300,000 of them. And it almost represented more than 10% of the nation's foreign-born population.
Wow.
Which is it's a massive number. I would say that's almost to the equivalent of when people from Mexico were moving into America.
Yeah, definitely. And the reality with, I mean, the entire Celtic world was a story that was cut short. They've always had the brunt end of Western Europe, at least um, from Caesar onward, essentially. And yeah, so that's kind of why you see so many Irish immigrants in America. And I mean, I have some of that heritage myself. If ancestry is to be believed, it's I think around like 20%. Um, my wife does as well. She also has some of the Italian. So I don't
Oh,
obviously. Yeah.
huge ties you got. Huge
Oh yeah,
ties.
definitely. So I think that the immigration wave happened for some malicious reasons, but obviously, I won't deny that it's now a part of uh, our existence in our story. And but the difference, though, is those are still European people, and they eventually assimilated to greater or lesser degree. Um, and many places maintain their ethnic pride, which I think is a good thing. They definitely should, but then still became American. And I don't see that happening with some of the immigration happening now. I and I can't recall the statistic on this, but I've seen that, and I've seen anecdotally that many Mexican immigrants do assimilate well, depending on where you are and how they are. I have met many who assimilated very well, who were very what we would call patriotic. That to me is the symbol of successful assimilation. Um, but then you look at, say, other places that have sourced immigration, Somalia, India, um, the Middle East. It's not the same to be said there.
No, it's not to
I
be
think
said
there are
there.
cultural factors for sure, but yeah, it's not the same as it was last time.
No. Well, like their concept of what a world is, bring in from their definition from Germany in the late 1800s. Talk about a world in which it's just a concept of what is around you, ideas that affect the people around you. And India, the Middle East, and Africa have very diverging worlds and worldviews as
Right.
well. Uh, and uh, and there's a lot of traffic between that. And I definitely have a history. Well, I'm not too sure on the immigration history for at least for my strain of the family. Obviously, one part is slave, is an
Yeah.
African American, and the other part is white, and that is um, a bit difficult. It's not entirely exact. There is
Hmm.
the little bit of Native American blood that I have as well, but at least from what my father has told me is that a large part of it of my blood is from Germany, particularly a part where it's more East Germany.
If you were raised Lutheran, then you definitely like that's most most people that mixed with blacks were not Lutheran. That's a very distinct thing, and that would say that the theory that it's German is correct.
Yeah, and it's Lutheran in particular, but the Lutheran racing is from my grandmother's side, which
Hmm.
is interesting
Yeah,
because my dad's side is more Catholic,
that's
which is
also
very
interesting.
interesting.
Where did
It
that come
is
from?
very well. So Fredericks is one of the last names, so it sounds very German as well.
Hmm.
But I'm
It
not too
does.
sure where the origin comes from, and neither does my grandparents know exactly because a lot of that was kept secret for whatever reason. I
Huh.
do not know why. Yeah, very interesting how that comes about. The Catholic side, I'm not too sure either if it was just conversion or just family heritage.
Yeah, usually it's family. So what I have found is historically the Catholic peoples in America came from that immigration wave and they stuck together. Um,
Mhm.
like my wife, for example, is a product of that environment of the admixture of Irish, Italian, and Polish. Those three groups tended to stick together, especially in the cities they were in. Um,
Mhm.
and that's where most, from what I understand, anecdotally at least, that's where most of the Catholicism that is family based, that isn't recent converts, that's where it came from, is from those particular groups, aside from, of course, people from Mexico and other places.
Mhm. And so, at least for me, which would make sense of where those clashes would come about, or where eventually I would come from, it will be in the state of Pennsylvania,
Hmm,
because that's where a lot of the original family ties came from.
interesting.
Was in Pennsylvania.
You could
Um,
have gotten some Irish then. That's not too far away. You should definitely do a DNA test at some point. I'd be very curious to see what you get.
yeah, I want to deny it because part of my blood that my dad does know for sure is that I do have English. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
so
I
how
mean, we
far?
all do.
uh, I mean, we
We
all
all
do,
do in America.
but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I am curious to see how much Irish it is because
Yeah.
from what my dad told me is that German was a huge part of it, a huge part of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so with in regards to immigration, kind of the reason that these things are different, like we said, the differences in ability to assimilate. That ability to assimilate exists for a reason because they view the world differently, as you said. But we in the West historically have been conquerors for the most part, rather than the
Yeah.
conquered. You know, we have had control over our own nations, our own powers, and they've represented us, which is historically rare, you might say, compared to other people. If you take Indians, for example, have a concept of jugad, which is essentially finding a loophole in the system, exploiting the system, and it being a virtuous thing because they've been a conquered people for hundreds of years by various powers. Um, and so, as a result, they're always trying to exploit the system. Um, when I was in Thailand, I remember there was one interaction in which I was at a gas station, getting more beer, of course, as you do in Thailand, uh, and I was standing in line like a civil human being, like a Westerner, and this Indian comes walking up to the counter, ignoring the line. There are other people in the line too, and the clerk just screams at him. And you could just tell he deals with this all the time. This is why. That is jugad, is they exploit the system anywhere they can. If there's not a law about it, they don't care. Um, and similarly with Muslim cultures, you have Qadiyya, which is essentially lying to Westerners about Islam and about what you actually believe, to bring them into the fold. And I've heard many horror stories of that, of white Western women being taken off to Muslim countries where then they're trapped there, and they can be like the law will defend the husband who beats her, and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, because based on the meaning, it is used for legal court lawsuits, but it's used for political issues, just like you're talking about. Because the political issue for Islam is to how can we surpass the West, and it's
Right.
been like that since the beginning. Because Islam and Christianity are the two biggest religions in the world,
Hmm.
and it's it's a no-brainer that those two major religions will compete against each other
Yeah.
back then and definitely now. And it would be foolish to think that we're not in competition right now.
Yeah.
Completely foolish. Um, and the nature of that competition is also changing because with it becoming more violent, it definitely in European circles, and it will definitely likely come around in America eventually. Definitely praying that it won't, but it's definitely going to happen. It's going to get more violent. I mean, we all saw 9/11. The competition is going to be bloody, uh, and because of that, you really need to be very careful on who you're letting in. And that was the assumption that I definitely believe that
Right.
Americans had during the early 2000s,
Hmm.
that the government was reliable and is actually looking into these people and their backgrounds and who we're letting into the country, like any other sane country would. But obviously, that didn't happen.
Right. And I would argue it's because we're just so morally defunct by this point. It's Aristotle said the strength of a people becomes its downfall, and all of that, which we've all heard 1,000 times. But where that applies is the rise of what Gad Saad calls suicidal empathy. And
Yeah.
he gives many anecdotes in his book, as to what that looks like, of a white woman wanting to prove how peaceful people are, so she bicycles across Eurasia, and then she gets captured and beheaded by ISIS. Um,
That was such an awful story.
yeah, there are tons of stories like that, and that is sort of the cultural disease infecting the West, is this like collective guilt, this original sin that there is no redemption of, for being successful in the past, for conquering other people in the past, where somehow we are to blame for what people in the past did for us. Um, and that concept, like I said, many consequences, very pervasive. Um,
Yeah, it's so odd. Well, I wouldn't say it's so odd. There were definitely seeds on why it came about,
yeah,
and I would say it stems from colonialism,
Mm.
and the perpetrator or the agitator, the main party that's been agitating it for so long, was socialists and communists
Yeah, and
because
I
you
would say it
saw
even goes farther back than that. You start to see Carol Quigley pointed out that you start to see sentiments in Britain when, like, within the late 1800s that are feeling bad for colonization and wanting to decolonize the nations.
that was one movement, but also that was during the time when in Europe, socialism was actually starting to get steam
Yeah.
because at that point, it started to come to a head when World War I started to popped off.
Mhm.
Because once World War I happened, and Mussolini saw this, that these wars would bring the downfall of these monarchies across Europe, and then
Yeah.
socialism uh, will take primacy in the capture of their nations. And it
Yeah.
wasn't far from the truth, even if we don't like them. That
Mhm.
did actually end up happening.
It did.
Um,
It's a
and
kind of mind virus that's feeding on the weakness of a people, who feel a kind of collective trauma for the First World War, and then it just takes over. And I know we've discussed this before, but you see that in Weimar era Germany, it just got so bad. And look at the artwork. The artwork speaks for itself. Look at Romantic era versus modern art. It's just terrible. You just like it feels like you're looking at a mentally ill society.
yeah, and for today, it seems like they were losing their soul, which is
Definitely.
even worse. Yeah,
Well, hating
and
yourself is just a terrible thing to do. It just kills the soul to hate yourself. But that's like the axiomatic claim that the left makes is self-hatred, is hatred of yourself, hatred of your people. And I really
it,
think Jean Raspail explained it well in A Campus Saints.
no, definitely, and it's so there were many different options that people could have taken
Mm,
if they felt some sort of guilt, even though they were not perpetrators of such actions to begin with. Like there was many colonial empires who done awful things to their colonies. I mean,
right.
you see Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands, sometimes the English.
Mm.
America didn't really have that had its like colonies per se, really not that
Sort of,
much.
not really. Um,
Not
and
really. That was the Philippines, and we didn't really
right,
treat them all too badly at all.
relatively speaking, not at all. And I think,
Relatively speaking, not at all.
and here's the interesting thing to me. I've noticed this personally is where is the left when it comes to the Ainu? If your colonizers
You're
have
right.
brown skin, it seems like suddenly empathy does not extend to you. They just got the
Yeah,
right to speak their own language and use their own names a couple decades ago. They're still fighting for the right to fish on their own land. Meanwhile, they're doing this and that for indigenous people in Canada and America. Um, we're on stolen land, this and that. What about the Ainu? Where are you for that? They have the Ainu are like basically they're pointing to the rights of indigenous people by the UN and telling the Japanese government that they violated that, and nothing's come out of it yet. Nothing, because the left doesn't care about that. They don't care about indigenous people. They just hate the West.
they do. They're completely centered on the West due to just communism in general.
Yeah,
It's the fight that they lost, and they want to reclaim victory. Not
mm,
only that, but American education doesn't really focus too much on indigenous populations in the old world. They
right,
focus populations on the conceptualized new world, which is in the Americas.
right.
They don't really talk about or care, put too much of a microscope on other indigenous people. And when they do it into colleges, and And unfortunately, there isn't much pushback on leftist ideology there. And when you do, you can actually have meaningful discussions, but the
Hmm.
colleges are so overtaken by socialist ideology, they don't even recognize it in themselves. And that's
Yeah,
terrifying.
it is. I think that Campus Saints really hammered that home. Feral Historian had a very good take on A Campus Saints, which is that it is a series of caricatures. Um, yes, it's exaggerated. That's the point. Like the way that the Indians are portrayed, for example, is a little bit exaggerated. That is the point.
Yeah.
Likewise, though, with the actual villains of the story, the Indians are the useful idiots. They're the means. The actual people perpetrating it, um, they are the ones actually, like Clemendio, for example, and the many other people, the many other radical leftists, which may have been a caricature for Jean Paul Sartre, which was an interesting thread there. That just hate the West and they hate themselves and they just want to destroy the West, much like the leftists at the very beginning of the story talking to the professor. They just it's Nietzschean will to equality. It's a hatred of greatness, and they just want to tear it down because it's great, essentially. The real villains of the story are the ones that hate themselves, that want to destroy what their ancestors have created for no other reason than they feel bad for being more successful than other people.
Which is, yeah, it comes from that guilt,
Yeah,
social guilt response that our society understands and fully understands and tries to make amends for that guilt. And now, and other societies don't feel the same way.
right. No one else is doing this.
No one
You
else
don't see
feels
the Chinese mass importing Indians because they're so great. You don't see that.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're not. But eventually, things change, and we'll see how that comes about. But yeah, they're not importing people from India because they're great. They're not. They're strategic rivals, and they'll
Right.
probably be like that unless one of them collapse. And I don't see India really collapsing, but they are going through some very troubling times ahead due
Hmm.
to one just they're just not making enough money. There isn't that much industry. Their industrialization is so wacky as well that they
Yeah.
really need to gather institutions that can build up trust in that society. Otherwise, there really is they are not going to go very far. Uh, Unless like the nationalists, like they do, are trying to get more power in government. We'll see where that goes. But yes, socialists do not like the West due to the greatness.
Yeah.
And on individuals on those levels, they don't understand how to even achieve success in their own lives. And the success that we see in America is usually based off of wealth. And there's
Hmm.
many ways you can actually measure a life based off success that doesn't rely on the wealth. But even if
Yeah.
wealth is your goal and you want to achieve that for your family, the knowledge gap on how to achieve it is vast. And their only out is to basically hound the wealthy that we already have in our country. And keep in mind, a lot of the wealthy in our nation, even though we have the most millionaires and billionaires in any country,
Hmm.
we're number one in that. But 70% of the people who are wealthy and who are millionaires and billionaires are first 10 millionaires and billionaires. They're the
Yeah.
first ones in their family to actually achieve that wealth. No other country really has that kind of statistic in the same, not only breadth, but also width.
But envy is the emotion that drives the left, as we know.
Envy is the emotion that drives it. Absolutely.
I uh, I
And
I would like to quote the Havamal, um, in which the wisdom of Odin is one man is rich, the other man is poor, neither has the other to blame.
It's very interesting. Because the Bible has something more different on that, and you can apply it to wealth, but you can also apply it to any aspect of life that you feel like you're lacking. There will always and it's in the concept. It's not the exact quote, but the concept is that there will always be people that who are better than you, and there always will be people that who will be worse than you.
Yeah.
And that goes in all directions, whether it's skill or wealth or whatever aspect you want to measure yourself against that person.
Right. And so envy and empathy both are emotions. They're simply that, emotions. And emotions should not be our ultimate driving force. I wouldn't consider myself a stoic, but I think they're right about that. That, those are things, when we feel those emotions, we should question them. It's natural to feel envy for a billionaire or whatever. Trying to, you're not going to level the playing field. You're just going to drag everyone down to the same lowest common denominator. And I mean, that's what we see with historic movements with communism.
Yeah, definitely. And it's worse, or as you say, socialism has a greater grip on hold when a lot of people who gain their wealth are family ties.
Yeah.
And that makes more sense in Europe, which is why it has a greater success rate there. Same with Russia. That's even more true of Russia, which is why I succeeded there in the first place.
Yeah. Especially with their culture considered. But yeah, so to circle back a little bit, we're seeing a common thread, like we mentioned, the fact that this sort of immigration isn't happening in other places in the same way. And really it is in-group morality. Something the West has been terrified of. Right. Everyone else looks after their people first. You have an Indian CEO of Xbox. What does she do? She lays people off, takes more H-1Bs. What are the odds? Whenever Indians look after Indians, Somalis look after Somalis, Jews look after Jews, every group looks after themselves. They all do that, but us. And so as a result, we get taken advantage of.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird for Black people too, because that does happen in the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a contingent where it doesn't do that as well, and that you can tell based off of the politics that they follow.
Yeah, that's called assimilation.
Yeah, it's called. You could say I say it's more than just assimilation. It's growing to almost diverging cultures. Really.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, because Black people who are conservatives have a complete different mindset and culture preference or cultural trajectory than those who aren't, and that's something that doesn't really get talked about or has huge coverage mentioned on that, because that is happening, that those two cultures are diverging. And it's an interesting topic, and
I think that's
get to that on different episodes as
well. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what I'm getting at, is there are Black Americans born in America who are not assimilated. There's a culture created around race that is separate from our culture. And then there are Black Americans who have decided not to be a part of that culture and be a part of the American Western culture. And I think that's where that distinction lies. And it is largely political. If you're a Black conservative, then you're aligned with the institutions, at least the ones how they were before they were fully corrupted.
Yeah, and there's a long road to that, and we can look at different. We can have a different episode on that, but it's so sad because there was a lot of trials and tribulation with initially the culture not wanting to accept you. Definitely, for sure. And then once the opportunity does, where the culture actually wants to accept you, not a lot of people take it. And it's a
Yeah.
tragic story. It's very tragic because there is a lot of contributions that Black Americans have made to American culture.
Yeah.
Like it's I would say it's almost at this point in time with going on to almost 100 years of uh, being freed,
Mm.
that it will be inseparable to not have Black people included into the cultural story of America.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I think that so I am a nationalist. I am a supporter of the West, and I am proud of my ethnic heritage. Um,
See.
I do think that, as Tamim Amsari calls it, there's a little bit of cultural bleshing, ethnic bleshing um, that is manageable. There's a margin where it works, and I do think that you know I do think that Black Americans and other groups of people who have contributed to Blood and Soil have some stake at it. There definitely should be a critical mass of white Europeans who are America, who are the West, but some amount of integration with other people is acceptable. Not to the
Yeah.
rates we see today, but the amount that, but again, some amount is okay. The ones who are integrating is fine as long as whites have the majority and we can preserve what's ours.
Yeah. And altruistically, like I wish it didn't have to be that way, but we're
Mm.
living in the real world, and unfortunately, that's what's going to be the thing for I would say for a few decades, which is more of an unfortunate circumstance that has come to be this way because the in-group loyalty is the problem, and
Right. We'll never
with
break that
critical
down either.
well, there is a way you break that down, and it's called assimilation. And we
Yeah.
completely lost the art of assimilation that many other countries have adopted, or actually every sane empire and nation in history knows how to do that.
Right.
And well, not always perfectly, but there are ones that who do it better than others. I would say the British have done it the best,
Yeah.
or us Americans, I would say, because I love my country. I think we do it the best, but each nation and each culture has its critical mass on how many people it can actually take in and actually assimilate and implicate them into the culture.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think also too, and I know we had discussed this before. The problem with the West is we're a high trust people living in a low trust world. As I mentioned earlier, we're used to being conquerors. Thing that's unique about Europe is having, and no one else is quite like this, having multiple major powers all side by side fighting each other constantly, but sharing a higher collective identity, but then also sharing similar rules. Much like what you see, say, with the Iliad, for example, where you have the Achaeans and the Trojans fighting, but they recognize the same gods and cultural practices, and so their style of war is built around that. Same too with Europeans. Everyone plays by the same rules, even if you're fighting each other. That's called chivalry. With chivalry and things like it in the medieval era, you have people. You have people fighting these conflicts. You say you defeat a knight in combat. You capture him so you can ransom him. The knight trusts that you're not going to brutalize or torture him or anything insane like that, and that you're going to demand the ransom and then give him back. And that
Yeah, and
system
that's
works because they all trust each other. But that is not true of people outside of Europe. They don't play by those rules, but we're still trying to use the old system to play with people who play by different rules.
Mhm. and that's based on the what would be Christendom, which is
Yeah.
getting more into the believing of the Bible and its ideas and teachings. Because at that point in time, Christianity, though it did spread to many corners of the world, it didn't entrench itself as strongly as it did in Europe. There are
Mhm.
more strongholds in other areas, such as Ethiopia, and then you have Georgia as well, or Armenia is a big example of that.
Yeah.
Um, and then it spreads into to the Greek, spread from the Greeks to rest of Europe, and then also into Eastern Europe, which will eventually become Russia. And you can see how that plays out with the clashing of cultures in the Crusades, because
Yeah.
uh, Islam didn't play by the same rules. And you can see that in the
Mhm.
book called The Templars on how they treated knights. Sometimes they arrested them, but the most time they killed them all,
Right.
or
You.
killed them all, put them into slavery, and
Mhm.
that's what was their normal for warfare for people of Islam in the Middle East. That was the norm back then.
Right.
And
And
so,
unlike now, they understood that back then, and so they had different rule sets for interacting with different people. Like
Mhm.
I can't recall who it was, but there was a pope that had put such a law in place um, to where you weren't allowed to use crossbows against Christians, but you were against Muslims. Or the more entertaining example of the variant of the Gatling gun, where they had round bullets for Christians and square bullets for Turks.
That's crazy.
I'd have
you
to find
know,
it. I'm sure I'll pull it up here, but
I don't
that's
have
what that
exactly
is
my head. Yeah, yeah.
they
You
understood they were playing by a different rule set interacting with Turks, and therefore you bring the crossbow or you bring the square bullets. Um, because they do the same to you. You give back what
no,
they give to you, and that's been found to be the best strategy. When it comes
talking
to
about theory, right?
Yeah, game theory is, of course, where we're going next. So, Axelrod's studies found that, I mean, many experiments were done on this. You should definitely look into them. Um, that the tit for tat strategy is the best strategy in game theory. That is, if they cooperate, you cooperate. If they defect, you defect. Um, and then if they go back to cooperating, you go back to cooperating. That prevents you from creating a cycle of violence. But then it also allows you to not be taken advantage of. Which is the
No,
problem with the
absolutely.
West today is we're being taken advantage of because we keep trying to cooperate with people who are defecting.
Yeah, and game theory in economics, which is what I'm taking in college, also teaches that as well in a macro sense for economics. We'll see
Mm,
in macro. I assume it's going to be the exact same thing. It teaches you what you get for cooperating, what you get for not cooperating. And tit for tat is really the best strategy. But I definitely see that cooperating usually brings better results in a high trust society. It always
right.
does. But if one person is cooperating and one person doesn't, the one who doesn't wins out in the end.
That's the problem. And also, if you're playing a single round of Prisoner's Dilemma or whatever else within the confines of game theory, defecting is the best strategy. If it's with a stranger you'll never play the game with again, you may as well defect. The default state in a large group of people where you don't know anyone is to defect. And that's the problem, is that having a cooperative society rather than a defecting society requires cultural institutions. It requires a specific framework, and if you don't do that, the natural state is to defect. You may recall traffic in San Diego. That is traffic in San Diego, is everyone is acting completely suicidal. and that's because
Yeah.
they don't give a shit about you. They just want to hurry up to get home to scroll on their phone to get their Uber Eats. Um, and
What
so
a
they will kill you and themselves to get there.
Yeah, it wasn't the same place to drive on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Really, like, because I don't know for you, but I always stuck. Like, if I was leaving in the afternoon, I was always stuck within an hour of traffic trying to head back to
Oh
my
yeah.
place.
Mine wasn't too bad
Um,
because I was going towards Hamul. And going east wasn't too bad because that's the country and not many of those people went there.
yeah, unfortunately, I was stuck on major highways to the east, so
Yeah.
I was getting the worst of the I was getting
Oh
the
yeah.
ringer, brother.
Hmm.
The Yeah, game theory is pretty. It's pretty easy to like understand, but I would say it's one of those theories is kind of harder to master because there are multiple ways to actually um, do elevating strategies, especially in higher trust societies or in
Hmm.
thinking between different nations and how they negotiate, because
Yeah.
um, there are more factors into it than just pure profit that you will learn just in economics.
Hmm.
And with different nations have different interests, and sometimes it's based on where they are in the world and who are their neighbors. And
Yeah.
who are their neighbors, I think, is more important than just where they are in the world, because the neighbors that you have pretty much determines what your foreign policy is going to be, probably for the rest of your nation's history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Same thing.
sorry, go on.
Yeah, because if you have basically neighbors who are not strong as you and who are relatively peaceful, your worldview is going to be charged around that. Say United States or China, like, we have relatively weak neighbors, so you're not really going to have to constantly fight your neighbors.
Yeah.
China is a little bit different because even though that their neighbors are peaceful, say the Koreans, and you can basically placate those in the south, like Dai Viet. Excuse me. Your northern neighbors are actually a lot more aggressive, which, based
Hmm.
on their politics, is why they made the Great Wall, because beyond those mountains, it was just plains.
Yep.
Yeah.
The cauldron of anti-civilization.
The steps.
The original fatherland, the steppes.
Yeah, what a harsh climate to live in.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Harsh
they,
climates make good warriors generally.
they do.
But
They do.
so I really think that that this thread that we've been exploring is explained very well by the Odyssey. Um,
Yes.
having read it, also having seen a couple adaptations, not the new one. I really like the
Oh,
way. Well, yeah, I'm not even going to talk about that for its endless problems. Um,
yeah.
so the thing about Homer and about the Odyssey, much like if you were adapting Shakespeare or Goethe, the problem you run into is that there are so many different themes. You basically have to pick one. Like the older movie adaptation picked hubris as a concept, which I like the way they did that. Um, but with Epic the musical, which you know, despite
Mhm.
the stigma that we have against theater, they did a good job. It's a faithful adaptation, especially compared to what Christopher Nolan did. There's a little bit of race changing, but I'm not opposed to it. And the reason being, it was a guy's passion project, so he invited some of his friends to do some of the roles. Like, can you really blame him?
Projects are usually turn out to be the best kind of projects, especially in art.
Right, exactly. And so it explored the moral development, the moral dilemmas involved. Um, and that's what I found most interesting, is essentially Odysseus goes into it with a kind of universal morality. He assumes his laws apply to other people, and his development, his arc, is realizing the moments he must turn his empathy off and do what's right and do things he doesn't want to do for the good of his people. um like uh I couldn't tell you how exactly this goes in the Iliad. I haven't gotten that far in it. But where so in the musical, Odysseus is confronted by Zeus, who basically explains he has to kill Hector's infant son, because if he doesn't, that son is going to grow up to kill his family. And so he says the blood on your hands is something you cannot lose. All you can choose is whose. You can kill a child of someone else, kill someone else's family, or they're going to come kill your family. That is the dilemma he found himself in, and he made the right decision for his in-group. And that continues on through the whole story. And so, in the West, in the post-Proto-Indo-European Europe, you find a sort of law of Zeus, if you will, where everyone agrees there are certain laws you obey, certain customs involving how you treat a guest, which has some practical application, because you bring the guest in and you do a tit for tat strategy with your guest. You cooperate with your guest until they give you reason that you have to defect. You let them in and you be kind to them until suddenly, until they've given you reason not to, like the suitors in the end of the story. The problem, though, is without that law, without that cultural institution, much like I mentioned earlier, you find the Cyclops, you find Circe, you find other people like that who do not obey the law of Zeus. They don't have that law. They don't have that cultural institution. Therefore, their first instinct is to defect, because they're making a single interaction with a stranger. And as we discussed, the best strategy in a single game of Prisoner's Dilemma or whatever else is to defect. And so that's exactly what they do. Circe is trying to protect her nymphs. Polyphemus is trying to protect his sheep. Doesn't matter the reason. They're protecting their in-group. They defect immediately the second they see him. They don't obey the law of Zeus.
And that's very interesting, to be quite honest. I'm going to say it's too different from a Christian worldview, but there are some differences in that. And you can see that through the Jewish history and the Bible for the Old Testament. It's just a retelling of what their history is. They do protect their in-group, but there is certain criteria for it, especially if it's a fight between good and evil. And there's a lot of evil that they had to deal with during those times, because it was a ruthless world and it was a low trust world. And those are some of the values that we tend to not really focus on, because it is quite, and it's definitely different from the world that definitely the boomers and definitely Gen X grew up. I wouldn't say entirely, because there are areas where you would see low trust societies, i.e., like Detroit, Chicago, New York, any sort of major city that had a lot of crime during the waves in the 90s. And then when it declined during the turn of the millennium, you would see those low trust worlds prop up, and this is where you see the concept of street smarts came in. And it seems weird that we've lost those lessons, or we didn't pass those on to our kids, because those lessons would have been useful, even though that the world that we live in now is very different than where they grew up in. So and it's competition.
And it's an important lesson for the West today. Because in medieval Christendom, you see their ability to distinguish between in-group and out-group. Likewise, as you mentioned in the Old Testament, look at how they treat the Canaanites. They understand there are moments when they have to turn their empathy off and do what's right for their people. And that's exactly what they do. Um, and I think that's with the groups that have been brought in and the evil, monstrous individuals who control certain institutions. That is our situation. Is
Okay.
we have to um, we have to be willing to turn empathy off and do the right thing for our people. We have to be in group focused once again. The thing we attempted in the boomer era, that's dead and buried by this point. There's no going back to that. We're not going to get the colorblind society.
Or the promise of the American dream.
Yeah,
It's got to be something different.
Right. In group morality is the way to go. I think that's where a survivable future lies, is if we can form a a barrier around the West and try and preserve it. And we don't have to allow. Yeah, but we don't have to allow any immigrants into our country, illegal or legal. We don't have to let anyone in. We don't have any obligation to do that. Our obligation, the state's obligation, is to protect the in group. The in group needs protected. The in group has a lot of problems right now that it needs to resolve.
Yeah, and before we go to the concept, which will be like the critical masses, which we're going to be touching on, is that the I think our conception of empathy is a bit different. Let me hear your explanation of empathy, because I think there's some differences in that.
So you're talking like a Socratic explanation of empathy is what you're getting at?
So let me explain my position then first.
Mhm.
Then, because empathy, how it was taught to me because of the Lutheran background, was to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And what that always means is to understand where that person comes from, how they think, their situation, how they got themselves in. The cariness or to feel sorry for that person is either pity or is sympathy, and empathy was more of what did this person think, how did this person thought, how did they get into this situation, what did it feel like to be in that situation, what decisions would you make, or what that decisions would that other person would make, which is a much harder step, and I would say it's much more useful in that. It wasn't something that I would say was used to um, as sympathy was to garner, like I feel you, I understand you, and a lot of people say that, but don't. I would say truly mean it, and
Yeah.
some people will confuse it with compassion, and compassion isn't that. Compassion requires action, which is why we talk about the Good Samaritan or being a Good Samaritan. Is those the Samaritans in that story? They took in that person off the street and actually fed the person. It was sympathy, but it was sympathy with like actual action, and it required a gratitude of that person receiving that action. It was those two things, and empathy I always saw was as a tool, not really an emotion. I guess that's just a different perspective in life. I always saw it as a tool, not really an emotion.
So I agree with your definition, but I think fundamentally it is to be treated as an emotion, in the sense of it is something that wells up within you. It is the feeling that makes you want to act, and you should decide whether to listen to it or to not listen to it. And moral development is to realize there are moments when you must not listen to it. You know, when some murderer file is at court, he gets convicted, and and he cries because he realizes he's been had, that's the moment to turn empathy off, for example. And we might feel the drive to put ourselves in their position, to feel what they're feeling, but that's the moment to turn it off with someone like that, because there are more important things to do, and because they're an enemy to us and we have to treat them like an enemy. And so I guess
Interesting.
that's what I mean, is kind of in the sort of stoic concept of an emotion, where it's something more coming from the uh something coming kind of out of the limbic system, and it gets to your prefrontal cortex, and you have to decide whether you're going to listen to it or you're going to ignore it. And I'm saying that we're doing too much listening of it and not enough ignoring of it.
Interesting. Because I always saw it differently as using empathy as the reason why you need to put somebody down for that reason. Because you know full well what the person's actions have, and if you let them go, the risk of them not doing it is huge. And they're most likely will do it again because you have the empathy to understand that person. When you understand that person, you probably need to you need to put that person down because you know what they're going to do. And I guess
Yeah, and
that's
so I
just
guess
a
what I mean
difference
is
between that you
not
and me have.
is sort of kind of like what you described, where there's a continuum of empathy creating compassion, and you block empathy from creating the compassion to compel you to act. You don't act in favor of, you don't act with compassion. Um, you stop the empathy right there. It's where of course you want to analyze your enemy, you want to consider their viewpoint and their perspective and what they're doing, um, but you don't let feeling bad about their position drive you to improper misfiring compassion.
I always saw that position of feeling bad about a person's life or position as either a sympathy or pity.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
Which is, I think it's the difference between like our upbringings and culture, and
Yeah, and
that's
I can
for me
understand
for
that perspective at least.
yeah, yeah. I think that's just differences in just how we're raised of understanding of empathy because
It's just a difference in definition, I think. I think we're getting at the same concept though.
I understand. And on the topic of critical mass,
Yeah.
and there are some video games that can actually model this pretty well with game theory,
Mm.
and something that I think that a general rule
Yeah.
for immigration, there's a critical mass point that we should never go over 30% or even to 30% of
Mm.
your base population for integration. Because once you hit closer to that threshold, it becomes very difficult or even dangerously impossible to actually inculcate that group of people into your culture.
Yeah.
Because, just like say, like if your group of friends have, let's say 5 people and you've been with those people for a very long time. Yeah, one person, not as difficult to bring that person in. If they can, you just kick them out. If you bring, let's say, 3 people in, it becomes a little bit more difficult then.
Mm.
A little bit more difficult to assimilate. Not impossible, but a little bit more difficult. Once you have the 4th one, there might be a cultural change or a cultural fusion, but even a hostile takeover is very possible with 4 against 5.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you have like a friend that you're really close with, and then you start forming a group, and then the things that you and your friend like to do got lost in it, and you just kind of got pushed
Yeah.
off to the side.
Oh, absolutely. Looks like it's getting a little bit dark outside, but yeah, and I say that 30% because with nations you have larger numbers as well. And if you have like a weak binding culture, adding a tons of people into it's only going to break or have your culture be superseded by someone else. I won't,
Right.
and I think that 30% rule definitely applies to the United States, even if it's very great at assimilating people.
Yeah. Um, and so I think, and one of my core points here was that I think game theory should be the foundation, and the tit for tat strategy should be the foundation for how we go about the world morally, and what we do for our in group. And I think that's kind of the dilemma we're at: is where is the reciprocity here? We have many different fronts. Like, name a topic, it's defect, 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 and then we cooperate, cooperate, cooperate. That's just parasitism. That's just being a victim. That's just being taken advantage of, whether it's some group of people from the third world or it's the country that we're giving trillions of dollars in foreign aid to while people can barely manage to get by. And that's one of the core issues of our generation is our so much of our effort and money is being wasted. Um, you know, uh, FEMA didn't have enough money to be able to handle the hurricane wreckage in North Carolina because they wasted it all on immigrants, for example. And then of
Yeah,
course,
wasted out giving them
yeah,
hotels and then buying
right,
them food. I remember all of that during the
and
Biden years. That was
yeah,
infuriating.
it was. And we spend trillions and trillions of dollars giving it to all these countries all over the world who don't give a fuck about us at all. And we get nothing in
Or worse,
return
hate
for it.
us.
Yeah, or they hate
Or
us.
worse, hate.
And so we are cooperating, they are defecting. Meanwhile, cost of living is getting worse every year. People can barely manage to get by as we lose half of our paychecks each month to federal and state taxes from that income tax that was supposed to be a temporary measure. This will never happen. But if I were to fix things, remove all foreign aid, and then therefore we could remove income tax, and then we could manage to get by. Prices would go up a little bit, but cost of living would be much more manageable. We could go back to a
Yeah.
single income home, restore our culture. We could do so many amazing things with that, but we won't because politicians would never remove the income tax. That's just the reality.
Well, no, because it's a huge income resource, and I can see why. Um, and I wouldn't say I would get rid of income tax, which is different from you, but I would definitely decrease it. But I definitely think that we definitely need to reprioritize what we're spending on, because that debt crisis isn't going to solve itself
Yeah,
at all whatsoever. Don't mind if I turn on the lights.
go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just be right here. All right,
Yeah,
here we
and
go.
the
The New York lights up back here are lighting
nice.
up. Yeah,
But
but the thing with that is going to your point that we do have to get rid of these all the edge spendings, which is foreign aid. We spent trillions of dollars into the entire continent of Africa and many different countries across Africa, and really got very little in return.
yeah,
We may have gotten some return from South Africa, a little bit from Nigeria.
hey, we
We
got
really
dead
didn't get.
Rangers in Delta Force. At least we got that.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's so bad.
It
Like
is.
waste. It's so much waste that we have been doing, and the goals that we're doing are not really straightforward to our people.
Right.
And yeah, like we and when we do, it's like put it like in the back of page 36, because
Yeah,
what we're doing in Africa is basically fighting ISIS there, which is in Nigeria, and
yeah.
we're fighting Islamic terrorism there. And we barely even get a whisper of
Mm.
that. of what we're doing in Africa, because there are some at some points with the military. I definitely believe with the military, we're actually doing good stuff. With USA funding, I think we're pissing it in the wind.
Yeah,
Like what we're doing,
definitely. That
like,
was a horrendous waste of tax dollars.
we're wasting it with getting very little in return at all.
Right.
It's infuriating,
Hmm.
and like not only that, but we also give a lot of money to our allies as well. There are some good developments, at least from that, but it's so much money. It's
I don't
billions
think
of
it's
dollars.
worth it. I think that money could have been better spent with the average American being able to make a living.
Well, I definitely, because that's what the European allies have been doing for years. Look
Mm.
with all their tax money has been going to social programs and not too much in the military because we basically fit the bill. Now
Right.
that's definitely changing now, but that's causing problems in Europe already. They're starting to feel the pain
Mm.
from not being responsible for their own defense, and
Yeah.
the ones who are facing the brunt of it, because I know for sure Poland has a reason to keep their military spreading up. They're right next to a country that's been at war with them off and on throughout the centuries, Russia.
Yeah.
They have a very good reason to have their military budget up. For all these other European countries that don't really have an enemy on the borders, like
You better
Spain,
catch up. Yep. They dug this hole. They can lie in it.
they can. If the European leaders were actually understood what was coming and the role that's been changing,
Mm.
it would have been much better. It would have been the situation would be much better, and we wouldn't have this much um, many problems between U.S. and Europe. Because
Yeah.
it really feels like the trajectory because of this is that America and Europe might actually culturally just break apart. I don't think that's going to happen in the near future, but I can see that in the far future for sure.
Yeah. And so I think I think the core issue here is we have lost the objective of a culture, of a state, of a people, everything like that. Um, treating our nation like it's an economic zone or like it's a battlefield for class warfare or any other garbage some secular ideologue will tell you. Um, Most
So we need
fundamentally, the yeah, the
sorry to break you. I
uh,
break you up on that.
very good.
That's my fault. Continue.
So above all else, the objective of a state is to protect its people. You know, our ancestors passed something to us. We ought to keep what they passed to us so we can continue passing it down the line. It's that simple. If we're not doing that, then we've lost the plot. We are not following our objective. Um, Profit should come secondary to what's right for our people. Um, Alliances, which we were warned against, should come secondary to what's good for our people. Um, and all of those things in mind, um, that should be the first thing. America should be first, and everyone who doesn't do that is approaching the territory of a traitor.
Mm,
Misguided at best, traitorous at worst.
yeah, boy, is there a lot of that coming down the pipe. But what I was trying to say,
Definitely.
we could do an episode on secularism because a lot of problems in the world that we're living now, let's say a lot of its origins is based on secularism and
Yeah,
its presuppositions. Yeah,
definitely.
like humanism as a derivative of that.
Oh yeah, yeah. We'll rip into that at some point.
Yeah, we're ripping into that at some point. But yeah, critical mass should be a rule for a country moving forward. Never go approaching 30% of our population being people from other countries. It's
But do
way
we
too
need
difficult.
immigration at all? It feels like it feels like just a weird chimera of white man's burden, but with a little bit of Marxist flavoring by this point.
So for practical reasons, for us in America, we should cut immigration to zero
Yeah,
because
at
right
least for the
now we're
immediate.
well, not just the immediate.
Yeah,
We need 5 years or maybe even a little bit more than that, but not beyond
yeah,
10 years because we really need to assimilate people or kick people out of the country who just aren't assimilating because it's too much for the system to handle. And we already saw this 5 years ago, and when Donald Trump was in office, um, that was getting a little bit under control.
mm.
But and then, of course, when Joe Biden came in, it just exploded and skyrocketed. And now we're going beyond just putting pressure on the system. We're trying to break it
Definitely.
in real time. And while like I still remember the first Trump term because there was there was a little bit of a spike in the middle, but it has been progressively has been going down, and then coronavirus basically came around. I should say COVID-19, but it came down on that time as well.
Mm.
Um, Things were stabilizing, and then Joe Biden came in, and then now we're trying to break the system. We're trying to break it, smash into pieces, and set it on fire. And
Definitely.
now we need an equal and opposite reaction, which is to lock down the border and kick as
Mm.
many illegal immigrants out as possible. And
Yeah.
that might not even be the full. That's not even going to be the full answer either, because our politicians have basically not only wasted our money, but also has foolishly let so many people in where the very system cannot even handle it anymore. And now young people who are coming up trying to be good American citizens can't get a good living for themselves, and
Mm.
they're struggling. And
Yeah.
it's no surprising why, looking at these statistics. And it's not because I keep hearing this from Republican politicians that the young generation is lazy. It's
Boomer
not
cons.
entirely true. Yeah, it's not entirely true. There are some people who are lazy, but the pressure that Gen Z is having is historical. It's nothing that any of them have ever faced ever,
Right. Looking at
and it's
you,
something that
Crenshaw.
yeah, it's
Let them
nothing
eat
that we have
ramen.
ever yeah, it's nothing that we have ever faced before. Uh, but there is something that we can take from the boomers uh, playbook, which is to get skills, get
Yep.
ourselves some skills, and actually make ourselves attractable to actually hire.
Yep.
That's something that we can do. But the historical pressures that we're facing, it's it's insanity.
Yep.
We're allowing way too many people immigrating into the country.
Mm.
Way too many people. That's why the wages are so low, and increasing them by government or increasing them by law makes the situation worse because it's not done naturally; it's done artificially. That's
Right.
why the debate on increasing minimum wage is so strong. You're letting
Yeah.
too many people into the system.
Yeah. Definitely. And um right, and it's just another way that, it can seem kind of hopeless, but I mean, if the situation were hopeless, their propaganda wouldn't be necessary. We stand here like the Roman legionnaire in Pompeii. No one to relieve us.
Yeah, we'll keep singing the message, man. We'll keep
Right.
doing that. There is
Oh,
there's still definitely a way out. There, well, I wouldn't say a way out. There is a way to
we're gonna
weather the
try.
storm. Yeah, we really are gonna try.
Only in
Um,
death does duty end.
Only in death does duty truly end.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's all the topics that we are going to
I
cover
think
for
so.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Next episode, we have some topics to talk about as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Uh, yeah. I'll be talking about the second right wing renaissance, the death of postmodernism. What was the other thing that we wanted to talk about?
The evolutionary use of AI is what you've got down.
Okay. Is there another thing that you wanted to talk about there as well?
I'm sure there is.
Okay.
We've got some time to figure that out.
Okay. Yeah. Because I definitely want for to talk about the positives that the right wing can actually hold its head up high. Because there
Yeah.
are definitely some positives.
Oh yeah.
Um,
But yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that'll about do it for us. So
Indeed.
yeah, I guess we'll see you guys in the next one.